Sok, a professional but Duke player, loses a game, and his brother approaches the upset man and asks him to play a game for him with very high stakes. Sok initially declines, but his brother persuades him. The men drive to a location that Sok does not know, and the player is left in the company of a driver named Trex who corrects the brother's play with a transmitter and an earpiece. Sok does not play by himself either. Instead, the old master directs him, and the chief in the location that Sok has to manage the game himself as the weather worsens and communication breaks down. Sok asks his brother to stall for time until the connection is restored after noticing that his brother is playing quite confidently and exchanging the master for the young girl bear cub. The game continues, but at this point Trix develops intestinal problems and flees to a nearby back alley is restored, but he doesn't hear and makes a fatal move. At this point Trix notices a thug drag Sok out of the car and drag him into the building, but there is nothing the man can do about it. In the hole, Sok sees his brother stripped and realizes how the bandits found out about the transmitter. He begs for mercy, but it turns out that the brother brought fake money to the game, which enrages the villains. One of them laughingly stones Sok, starts the game but quickly loses. The Lord wounds Sok, kills his brother, and then places the knife in the player's hand. Time passes. Once at prison, the warden, a big Badu, orders Sok to sit at the board and fight him. If he wins, the Lord promises to let them live. Weeping Sok's Clover attempts to beat an elderly prisoner who works for the local authority. He requests a day off and offers the warden a sizable check as payment, but the warden declines because the authority no longer supports his cell. The guy attempts to examine the game but is unable to determine where he made a mistake. At this moment, Sok says something, and then the authority recognizes the player's skill and requests that he defeat is also the boss. Sok must make him a wager. Tessa complies with his request by betting the authority check. If he wins, he requests to be fired. The men begin the game, and Sok wins, leading the angry boss to put him in a punishment cell. One day, Tessa discovers a note in his food offering him a Badug game. Right away, there is a knock on the cell wall. Tessa accepts the challenge and draws a playing field on the but always loses, so he asks for at least the name of the unknown player, but instead finds another note in which his opponent thanks him for playing and instructs him to find a player nicknamed God playing in one of the city districts after his release. After being released from solitary confinement, Sok asks the authority to teach him how to fight, and his underlings take it upon themselves to train the guy. Now old Sok's time is split between play and fighting. Old Sok's time as he progressively improves in everything and soon dispatches multiple opponents at once with ease, for which he is grateful. The time has arrived for his socks to be protected by the authority. Comes forward when the boy is released and offers him to join his team. Sok queries. In the meantime, a girl who is thought to be special is brought before the gaming club's lord. She is asked to solve a problem in Baduk and will be rewarded based on the solution she will offer. The girl easily solves a very difficult problem, and her owner names a very high price. The Lord gives the girl the money and sends her away with his men. However, after he leaves, the girl's owner sends the girl a message. The Lord foresees this and waits for the murderer, cutting him, and then all of the Lord's crew while backup beats up a visitor in one of the Badu clubs. The gray-haired master makes fun of her, but the girl responds with hurtful remarks which pleases the player who is present. The Lord then gives her the girl and asks her to take care of the valuable acquisition. After serving his 7 years, he finds a member of the Badu club and decides to return for more. The group of abusers who used to keep track of his slaps approaches him with a Badu game. He easily outplays her sock and then offers to play for clicks. Much to the man's amusement, her sock decides to buy him out with change but insists on sticking to the deal. The man laughing agrees. However, after the first flick, he realizes he simply can't take 9 more. Indignant, he grabs a knife. Sok becomes his steadfast victim with one more flick. While Sok knocks the killer's eyes out, Trix is playing Baduk with a player he knows and is caught cheating. Trix rushes away, and Sok fights off the cheater. Sok then remembers his brother and begs him for assistance in avenging the killers. He leads the man to the room he rented and shows him pictures of his enemies. When Trix hears the amount of the reward, and yet he effortlessly defeats the amateurs by remembering every move. Tezsak requests permission to study under the master and sits down to play. Trix tries to uncover the master's secret while Tezsak loses the game. Tezsak invites God to the cafe table and inquires about the cause of his blindness. It turns out that they both were victims of the same villains. Tezsak begs the blind old man for assistance, but he declines. The following he finds his old sidekick, who is now a carpenter despite having formerly lost an arm. It turns out that this occurred immediately before the match in which they lost to the Lord. The carpenter accepts to join the team at a later time. Trix visits the Lord's private spaces within the Badu Club. Trix plays the ideal loser who loses money and chooses data on all of the Lord's opponents, where the wins amount to millions and access to such a game is extremely tough. Only the strongest player is permitted to compete against the Lord himself. Entourage. After learning everything, Tessa walks to the club and sits down at the same gaming table as the girl. She grows interested in him but can't recall ever seeing the man before. When he enters the club, he is throwing money around, losing to everyone, and demanding that they bring him their favorite cigarettes. He acts provocatively, reacts violently when he loses, and calls for the Lord's sidekick. He prepares all kinds of technical stuff for secret clues and new documents for Trix. He definitely takes out the earpiece and places it in the crumpled cigarette packet to get rid of the evidence. His enraged opponent calls to check on the cheater, but he is found to have nothing compromising on him. The gambler uses God's clue to win the game, get his winnings back, and take his opponent's money. The player offers to play a game with him and apologizes for the rude guest while God teaches them about the idea of the divine move, which only occurs once in a person's lifetime, as Tezsak plays with the girl and her associates. Suddenly, the Lord himself sits down at their table, but the guy doesn't act like he knows him. Later, the Lord questions back about the new acquaintance, and she assures him that he is a common programmer. The Lord believes the girl likes the person and beats her, but she reminds him that God has a plan and that sometimes even the powerful lose the game. The next day. Receives an invitation to a party in the Trix van, inspects the van for bugs but discovers nothing because the video device is hidden on Trix himself, who slyly diverts the player's attention with constant chatter and silly antiques. Trix wins, which enrages the player. The gray-haired master laughs at him. The man then asks for his assistance. He returns to the Trix van, but this time, the master is playing for him but is unaware that the player himself is present. Trix continues to work together, diverting the player's attention, and succeeds. The enraged player pulls out a knife, but at that moment his sock enters the van because he intends to pay back the old debt. A fight ensues. The old master sees this and flees, but the carpenter and God catch up with his car and ram it, and his sock, having finally knocked out the player, brings him into a large cold room. He locks the door with a combination lock and makes the player lunges at Hesek because he can't take the cold any longer. Hesek defeats him by reminding him of his brother Tessa and then hands him a booklet with an assignment. If he completes it, he will know the combination to the lock and be able to escape. In the meantime, the Lord discovers the player's body in the chilly chamber, and Tessa calls him, offering to play for a wish. Tezsak travels to a cafe where he meets back up, offers to play for a wish, and the two settle down at the ball board. The player Tezsak delivers the body to the Lord together with their life. The game Tezsak has challenged him to, the stakes of which must be Master's life. Despite the Grey Master's resistance, the game begins, and at first the Master wins, but suddenly luck runs out and the old man loses the game. Tezsak offers to turn the board over if the Lord wants to know the names of the players. The Lord is furious and goes to the Grand Master and finds him tied up. In the Master's blood on cue, the gray-haired Master pleads for mercy, but the Lord himself snaps his tongue, splattering blood on the board. Immediately, a message arrives through which the Lord learns that his opponent is very close by, and as he peers out the window, he notices a Tess Hawk in the dusk. The Avengers team gathers for dinner, and the blind old man tells them that once, while he was sitting in the street, a man came up to him and gave him a blind Badu kit. They played for a year, and during that time, the stranger taught God a lot, but after that, the man vanished. Tez-Sok believes that the man was his cellmate because when he tried to see the man's face, he noticed that the cell walls were transparent. The Lord sees the video of Backup having a sexual encounter with Tez-Sok and asks Trix to clean him up. He shaves the man, takes him to a store to buy new clothes, and then takes him to his daughter's house. However, as they approach the building, they are seized by the Lord's handmaidens, and the pair are led to him. The Lord has heard that such a master lives in the city of Busan, but knows nothing else at this time. The Lord encourages techniques to help his player with the Tez-Sok-provided puzzle, and when he commits an error the Lord calls Tez-Sok, who remembers him at last, and offers to play for his life while he plays with his friends. Tez-Sok sits down at the board and calls the moves and Trix moves the stones, but none of them are aware that Backup and the girl are playing for the Lord. The Lord starts to win, but the girl makes a cunning move, and the friends lose. Then the Lord stabs God. At this point, he delivered the last blow, pinning his hand to the board. The Lord orders Backup and the girl to play at full strength or they will both die, and the girl remembers how they discussed the game with Tez-Sok. Tessa enters the hole and sees God bleeding. He throws him onto Tag and the Lord, pointing at Trix, promises to let him live if Tez-Sok wins. In the meantime, the friends take God outside to the car where he asks his friend not to play with the bandit. It appears that the brilliant kid Tez-Sok enters the building once more. The game starts, the carpenter with an axe bolted to the stump of his hand starts to fight in the parking lot, and Tez-Sok makes move after move while the Lord warns that if he wins, Backup will die. She gives the girl secret signs, and she plays along with Tez-Sok until the unsinkable occurs, and the players draw, which never occurs in Baduk. The Lord then tells him to bring in Backup in his song, and the players agree to it once the enemies are one-on-one. The Lord is about to stab his sock, but Tessa dodges the knife at the last second. The fight continues until Tessa has the dagger with which the Lord took his friend's life in his hand. The Lord instructs his opponent and pins his palm to the board. Exhausted, Tez-Sok sits against the wall and surveys the terrifying surroundings. The boy visits the god's daughter and presents her with a sizable check from her father. He then visits his nephew, giving him gifts and asking him to help him with puzzles on his new phone. When he gets to Zagrantak's house, he notices him carving a bust of God. He then visits the location where he played Baduk. There, he remembers his friend by pouring a glass of his favorite beverage and dipping game pebbles into it. Later, a car stops in front of him.